Case develops. A top U.S. lawmaker says a Senate probe is increasingly seeing an obstruction of justice case against the president. Threats of war, the rhetoric between the U.S. and North Korea heating up as South Korea prepares to host military drills. And inside the campaign, a new book describes Donald Trump's wrath during the race for the White House. Thanks for joining me, everyone. I'm Amara Walker. Michael Holmes is off. This is CNN Today. And first this hour, the ranking Democrat on the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee is raising the possibility of obstruction of justice. Senator Dianne Feinstein says the committee is seeing a case developing against U.S. President Donald Trump. Her comments come just 2 days after former White House National Security Advisor Michael Flynn pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI. Here's what she said just a few hours ago.
I think what we're beginning to see is the putting together of a case of obstruction of justice. I see it in the hyper-frenetic attitude of the White House, the comments every day, the continual tweets, and I see it most importantly in what happened with the firing of Director Comey. And it is my belief that that is directly because he did not agree to lift the cloud of the Russia investigation. That's obstruction of justice.
And now Mr. Trump's personal attorney is telling CNN that he crafted a controversial tweet about the firing of Michael Flynn from President Trump's Twitter handle. That tweet posted on the president's account said this, quote, "I had to fire General Flynn because he lied to the vice president and the FBI." Jeremy Diamond is at the White House now with more. And Jeremy, what more do we know about how and why this tweet was drafted, apparently by Trump's personal lawyer? It's raising a lot of eyebrows and questions.
That's right. A lot of questions that the White House and the president's personal attorney, John Dowd, are trying to answer this morning. John Dowd claiming to CNN that he was, in fact, the one who drafted this tweet, which suggested that the president knew that Michael Flynn had lied to the FBI before he fired him. Not only lied to the vice president, but lied to the FBI, which is, of course, a crime to which Michael Flynn pleaded guilty to on Friday. Dowd told me in an email this morning that he drafted the tweet, but that it was posted likely by social media director Dan Scavino, who works for the White House, of course. But again, it is unclear where the White House or where John Dowd was hoping to go with this, because, again, it raises this suggestion that the president knew a crime had been committed. Now John Dowd is saying that the president did not know that Michael Flynn had lied to the FBI before he fired him. And again, that was just one of several tweets that we saw from the president's social media account on Twitter. He also tweeted that he never asked Comey to stop investigating Flynn, just more fake news covering another Comey lie. The president, of course, has been adamant that despite former FBI Director James Comey's claims that the president asked him to drop an investigation into Michael Flynn, the president continuing to insist that he did no such thing.
Yeah, and it still makes you wonder what the strategy was behind that tweet where Trump says that General Flynn lied to the vice president FBI, and that is why he was fired. So obviously we saw this Twitter rant once again on President Trump's Twitter feed. We saw him bashing the FBI and its reputation. But the president also seizing on news that Robert Mueller removed a top FBI official from this Russia investigation because of some anti-Trump messages.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We just learned over the last day or so that Robert Mueller actually removed a top FBI counterintelligence agent from his investigation into the president and the Trump campaign because of some apparently anti-Trump, pro-Clinton text messages that he sent to another FBI agent. This happened over the summer, actually, around the time when Paul Manafort's house was raided. Paul Manafort, of course, the former campaign chairman for the Trump campaign. But what's interesting is what the president was also trying to point to is that this FBI agent was actually one of the lead agents who led the investigation into Hillary Clinton and her email server. So the president seizing on that news to try and once again discredit Robert Mueller's investigation and, in the process, tarnishing further the FBI and the Justice Department's reputation.
You're right. Jeremy Diamond, we appreciate you reporting from the White House. Thank you very much. Joining us now with his perspective and the continuing Russia investigation is CNN legal analyst Michael Zeldin. Michael, always great to see you.
Thank you.
First off, I want to talk about this tweet that is getting so much scrutiny, where you have Trump saying that he had to fire Michael Flynn because he lied to the FBI. Do you see any legal issues there from this tweet? Because, again, the argument is that if Trump knew at that point that Flynn had lied to the FBI, his appeal to Comey a day later to let the investigation go could constitute an obstruction of justice investigation. Your thoughts?
Well, if it were true that the president knew that Flynn had lied to the FBI, then everything you said in motion from that would be correct. My personal view is the president did not know at the time of the firing of Flynn that he had lied to the FBI. I don't believe anybody but the FBI knew that, and maybe even the FBI didn't know at that point that it was a lie. Remember, this is all the way back to January. Mueller doesn't come on until May, so I'm not clear in my own mind that anyone recognized this as a lie. But certainly I don't believe the president knew it to be true that he lied to the FBI, because the only way he could know that would be from the Attorney General, Sally Yates, and she testified that she did not tell him, or the FBI agents. And the FBI agents are under strict restrictions about coordinating with the White House on ongoing criminal investigation. So I don't believe it's true. The more important thing, I think, is the president tweets this morning that he never told Comey to drop the Flynn investigation. That's a very declarative statement, and that puts him at direct odds with what Comey testified to under oath. And I believe there's going to come a time in this investigation when the president is put under oath. And you may therefore have a situation where the president is saying something under oath and Comey is saying something under oath that is different from one another, and Mueller's going to have to decide who's telling the truth. That, I think, is the president's greatest point of potential legal jeopardy.
Overall, in terms of the obstruction of justice angle, because you have senators, Democratic senators now talking about that. Dianne Feinstein saying the Senate Judiciary Committee is now building a case of obstruction of justice against the president. Do you see that there is enough there to build a case, at least when it comes to this conversation between President Trump and Comey about going easy on the National Security Advisor?
Right. So if we're putting together a puzzle, if that's what an obstruction investigation is, there are a lot of pieces worth looking at. The request that Comey give the president loyalty, the request that Comey drop the investigation, the firing of Comey, the request by the president to the congressional committees that they drop the investigation, the request by the president that he ask his chief of staff and his intelligence officers to intervene with the FBI to drop the investigation. So there are a lot of things here that are important parts of an analysis of obstruction of justice. I think, though, that before they get to a indictable offense, they're going to need something additional to that which we've just discussed, and that, I think, is going to be if the president lies about it under oath. So that if you have all those pieces in the mosaic, plus a lie under oath, then I think we're in the exact same position that we were with President Nixon and with President Clinton, which is obstructive behavior, lying about that, and that equals an indictable offense or an abuse of office article of impeachment. That's where I think this thing is headed by a matter of investigation, but not necessarily predetermining what the conclusion of Mueller will be.
Fascinating points and scenarios you raised. Michael Zeldin, always a pleasure to have you on. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Well, the U.S. has moved its most advanced stealth fighter jets to the Korean Peninsula ahead of week-long military drills with South Korea. But the North is furious over the move, saying it is a direct provocation that puts the region on the brink of nuclear war. Now, this comes just days after North Korea fired its most powerful missile yet, which experts say could hit anywhere in mainland U.S. Let's go now to Paula Newton standing by, watching the developments from Seoul, South Korea. These exercises that we should mention were planned before that ICBM launch by North Korea. But obviously this is a reaction from North Korea that we should expect, and the fact that stealth fighter jets are being deployed, something that should infuriate the North even more.
Yeah, and infuriate them because even though they won't admit it, they do know that in terms of a preemptive strike, it is those stealths that would go in and try and knock out any defense, air defense capabilities that North Korea may have. Having said that, yes, a huge bone of contention here, and it leads to the escalation in rhetoric, but also, according to General McMaster, the real threat of war. He was speaking first at a defense conference on the weekend in which he said that, that the time is ticking and that it is imperative now that the world do something to denuclearize North Korea, but then went further on one of the Sunday morning talk shows. Take a listen.
Has the potential of war with North Korea increased since this latest launch?
I think it's increasing every day, which means that we're in a race, really. We're in a race to be able to solve this problem, not just us, right, but the United States, all of our allies and partners. As we know, China has tremendous coercive economic power over North Korea. I mean, you can't shoot a missile without fuel, right? And so there are ways to address this problem short of armed conflict, but it is a race because he's getting closer and closer.
So you heard him there say it was a race and you're getting closer. And apologies, that wasn't from the Sunday morning talk shows. But Amra, what he said on one of those shows was incredibly significant, saying that, in fact, it would lead to proliferation throughout Asia, something that the Trump administration, again, will not tolerate. Why this is controversial is that even here in South Korea, there is a reckoning to be had that perhaps North Korea has come so far already that they need to try and deal with North Korea as a nuclear state, and that is the most realistic posture. The Trump administration still rejecting that, and that is where you could lead to a real conflict on the peninsula.
Yeah, very good point. And speaking of heated rhetoric, Paula, you had the Republican Senator Lindsey Graham on a Sunday morning show on CBS with some really alarming comments, I must say. He was basically calling for the U.S. to pull out the spouses, the children, next of kin of U.S. military members. Take a listen.
I'm going to urge the Pentagon not to send any more dependents to South Korea. South Korea should be an unaccompanied tour. It's crazy to send spouses and children to South Korea given the provocation of North Korea. So I want them to stop sending dependents, and I think it's now time to start moving American dependents out of South Korea.
I don't even know what to say to that. I mean, that's shocking words from the Republican senator who's basically saying war is definitely a possibility.
Yeah, and if it's shocking to us, imagine how the South Korean government is feeling at this point, especially with the Olympics. The world, they are inviting the world to come here starting in February. And this is at a point, Amra, where this kind of rhetoric doesn't help. And you can understand that from the South Korean point of view, when they are looking at those comments from American politicians, they are trying to move people to the table and are willing to deal with certain preconditions from North Korea that perhaps they weren't willing to do last year. I mean, to that end, in the early new year, there is supposed to be some type of a diplomatic conference in Canada, and they're hoping that that will move them further down the road in dialogue and get away from some of that rhetoric that you just heard from Senator Lindsey Graham. I mean, the bottom line is they do have the Olympic Games here. They are trying to encourage North Korea to participate, to at least take down the temperature on the peninsula for at least a little while.
Yeah, you're right. You can't forget that the Olympics are just right around the corner. Paula Newton, thank you very much. Live first there in Seoul. Well, a boat collision off the western coast of South Korea was responsible for the deaths of at least 13 people. It happened early Sunday morning when a fishing vessel and a refueling tanker collided. 2 people are missing, including the fishing boat's captain. South Korea's President Moon Jae-in is asking emergency responders to continue searching for them into the night. It's unclear what caused the accident. A Coast Guard official says it's believed the vessels collided while they were trying to pass each other. Tensions continue to run high in the Central American nation of Honduras as the country's presidential election remains unresolved 1 week on. A recount of thousands of disputed votes is underway right now, and representatives of the dueling candidates are on hand to observe it. Now, the opposition is accusing President Juan Orlando Hernandez of manipulating the vote count, which he denies. The country's electoral tribunal says the people deserve a resolution.
We feel that the Honduran people, as we said yesterday, deserve a result, and that result cannot be stopped or be in the hands of any presidential candidate or any party. And this I say in general terms.
While some of the opposition protests have been peaceful, others, including this one on Saturday, were ruckus. The government implemented a curfew, but has now lifted it in some areas, which the opposition demanded. Time to take a short break on CNN Today. When we come back, a decision with monumental consequences. The U.S. could be about to defy 70 years of international consensus and declare Jerusalem the capital of Israel. Also, Big Macs and scathing outbursts of former top aides revealing new book about Donald Trump when he was a presidential candidate.
He demands such perfection, and he deserves it.
That's right.
We wanted that campaign to be perfect from the time the music was cued to the time he walked on the stage to the walked off.
U.S. President Donald Trump is set to still be weighing a foreign policy decision, which could have wide-ranging implications, whether to formally recognize Jerusalem as the Israeli capital. Now, Donald Trump's son-in-law and senior advisor Jared Kushner spoke about the pending decision at a conference Sunday.
The president's going to make his decision, and
he hasn't made his decision?
He's still looking at a lot of different facts, and that when he makes his decision, he'll be the one to want to tell you, not me. So he'll make sure he does that at the right time.
Well, the potential move has the Middle East on edge. Palestinians say the U.S. would risk forfeiting its role in the peace process with Israel. Now, the issue is coming up now because Mr. Trump is expected to announce this week if he will keep the U.S. Embassy in Tel Aviv or move it to Jerusalem, which he promised to do during the presidential campaign. CNN's Ian Lee sampled opinions on Jerusalem's ancient streets.
At one level, it's a city like any other. People sell, people buy, normal life. But Jerusalem's old city is special. And this is the best vantage point, here on the Mount of Olives. The Dome of the Rock in all its magnificence, a key holy site for Muslims. Behind it, if you know where to look, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, built on the site where many Christians believe Christ was crucified. And out of sight from this vantage point, the Western Wall, holy to Jews, supporting the mount where the temple once stood. It's not Jerusalem's significance that's in dispute, it's its status. After nearly 20 years divided by barbed wire, Israeli forces took control of the whole city, east and west, in 1967. The international community did not recognize what Israel called the unification of Jerusalem. Embassies stayed in Tel Aviv. And East Jerusalem was accepted by the international community as the capital of a future Palestinian state in a negotiated settlement between Israelis and Palestinians. This area is called Abu Tor, and it's a bit of a rarity in Jerusalem. That's because it's a mixed neighborhood. People who live on this part of the street identify as Palestinians.
Inside I am Palestinian. And I'm a Muslim, and I'm proud about that.
I don't think it's a successful step to move the embassy, Khamis tells me, and it's not the right time to do it. But the Israelis and the Americans have other agendas that we can't change. A bit further down the road, and let's talk to some folks here.
I'm an Israeli woman. I live in Jerusalem. I love Jerusalem.
Palestinians say they want East Jerusalem to be part of their capital. What do you think about that?
I don't like to talk about this. I think Jerusalem is Israeli, for Jewish.
What are your thoughts on the United States moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem?
Great. First of all, it's not going to be a Palestinian country, and it always was Israel.
Some Israelis who didn't want to be on camera told us they don't support moving the embassy. Whatever President Trump announces, the position of the vast majority of the international community remains clear. East Jerusalem is considered occupied territory. All settlements are illegal. Their view likely won't change quickly, even if the U.S. Embassy changes addresses. Ian Lee, CNN, Jerusalem.
Steam pressing his pants while he is wearing them. Big Macs and angry outbursts. That was life on Donald Trump's campaign trail, according to his fired campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski. Co-authored a book coming out Tuesday detailing his time as a top aide for the then presidential candidate. The Washington Post obtained a copy of the book before its release. And in one anecdote, Lewandowski said Trump had a temper, and the mode that he switches into when things are not going his way can feel like an all-out assault. It would break most hardened men and women into little pieces. Lewandowski appeared on NBC's Meet the Press Sunday.
How many times did you think about quitting?
No, Chuck, I never thought about quitting, but, you know, when you give up the sacrifice of time with your family and all the things that were important to you, and he demands such perfection, and he deserves it.
That's right.
We wanted that campaign to be perfect from the time the music was cued to the time he walked on the stage to the walked off, and the little things. He is so good at those little details that that's what we're referring to. And he'll tear your face off. And believe me, it's happened to me many times.
Haddis Gold is CNN's reporter for European politics, media, and business. She is joining us now from Washington with more of a preview. So if our viewers didn't pick it up from that comment there from Corey Lewandowski, this is a book that paints a pretty positive picture of Trump, and then he saves his ammo for Paul Manafort, the then campaign chief. But overall, tell us how this book describes what it was like to work for Trump and what his temperament was like.
Well, it paints a positive picture of Trump, it seems, but there are definitely some anecdotes which don't exactly make the president seem a pleasant person to work for, including some vindictive streaks like leaving behind campaign aides when their food took too long at a restaurant. And there's also some interesting anecdotes just in terms of the president's personal lifestyle, one of which actually comes up in terms of news from this week. Lewandowski and Bossie in the book, they detail the president's diet, and we knew that the president really enjoys his fast food and he loves McDonald's, and they said that a typical meal for him would include 2 Big Macs, 2 Filet-O-Fish, and chocolate milkshake. Now, the caloric content of just that meal is more than what's usually recommended in an entire day for an adult male. And just this week, actually, White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders declined to really tell us whether the president is going to do the annual physical with the military doctors and then release that information to the public. That's traditionally what presidents do so that we can get a window into their health, because obviously if they are healthy enough to continue being president, it's a very stressful job. And we're not sure if we're going to see that from the president. And this window into his diet might prompt some people to ask him to do so.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting because his diet, the type of food that President Trump likes, it seems to be a constant theme in the book, according to that article written by the Washington Post. And we've seen pictures in the past that have been tweeted like this one of President Trump eating Kentucky Fried Chicken or eating McDonald's fries and other meals from there. So, I mean, this is about the president really enjoying fast food. I mean, does he eat fast food all the time, according to the book?
The book doesn't, we don't know yet how much the book talks necessarily about fast food, but he clearly has a preference for it, and we've heard multiple stories of the types of food that he likes. So he's a meat and potato type of guy. But this book will definitely be investigated and really taken apart for all of these sorts of details that really only a campaign manager and top aide could know. I would not be surprised, though, if they had cleared a lot of it with the president of the White House, because clearly these are two still very loyal people to the president, and as we saw from that clip. So despite some of those moments that might not seem as flattering to us, to those people who support the president and to his staff members, they might see it as positive sides.
And, you know, from the outside, it looked like Trump ran a pretty chaotic and competitive and unpredictable campaign. Was that a pretty accurate assessment from the people on the outside, according to Corey Lewandowski's book?
Oh, it definitely seems so. From the snippets that we have so far, it did seem like a very chaotic campaign. There's an anecdote that they detail in this article where the president at one point asked his helicopter pilot to fly to a certain level so that he could call Paul Manafort and yell at him for a comment he made about saying how the president should avoid going on television for some time. There just seems to be a lot of yelling in general from the snippets we've seen from this book, and a lot of high-stress situations. And we've known from a lot of reporting that the president enjoys sort of this internal fighting, and that's clear from just these snippets that we see in this Washington Post article where Corey Lewandowski talks about the tensions he had with Paul Manafort and with Jared Kushner and with others, and obviously Corey Lewandowski did not last the entire time.
Right, exactly, as he was let go. Haddis Gold, thank you so much for that preview, and of course we'll be talking much more about this book when it is released on Tuesday. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
And thank you for watching. That is our time. I'm Amaryl Walker. World Sport is up, plus your headlines after this break.